Hi and welcome to this look at the 14-day weather prospects. It has been pretty cold recently and much of southern Britain has seen its first significant snowfall of the winter. Here in Berkhamsted we had about 7 centimetres of snow on the 24th of January, and that was followed by clear skies overnight and a really spectacular sunrise the next morning, which I tried to capture on this photograph that you can see. Now, can we expect more snow during the next couple of weeks or not? Well, unfortunately, forecast confidence falls pretty quickly this week. The reason for that is because the UK is going to be near to the boundary between cold and mild air masses. To help illustrate that, I'll show you the upper air temperature forecast sequence for the coming days. Here we go. This chart is for 12 GMT, Tuesday the 26th of January, and I'll just highlight the UK here. Hopefully you can see it if I circle it. Now, this is showing air temperatures at about 1500 metres above sea level, so way above our heads. The blues and purples basically indicate cold air, with the yellows, oranges and greens to a lesser extent showing milder air. What we can see to begin with is that central and eastern parts of Britain are still under blue shading, but we've got green shading and orange shading just pushing into the southwest, Northern Ireland and Wales. So what I'll do is play this sequence so we can see what's expected to happen during the short term. Here we go, and it's in 3 hour steps. If I just pause it here, 18 GMT, Wednesday the 27th of January. By then the greens have pushed further eastwards and northwards across the UK, but the blues are holding on in northeastern parts of Britain. What that actually means in terms of the weather, apart from it's going to be colder in the northeast, is something which I'll come back to in a moment. But for now, let me just continue playing the sequence. Here we go once more, and I'll pause it here, which is 18 GMT, Friday the 29th of January. By then, what we can see again is something quite similar. The blues are holding on over much of Scotland, and once more they're beginning to encroach into northeastern parts of England, with the greens really elsewhere. So perhaps that's suggesting that the cold air is beginning to push back southwards. Let's see if it does. So I'll resume, and we're now going into the weekend. I'll pause it here, 15 GMT, Saturday the 30th of January. And as we can see by then, the blues have now indeed pushed back down across most of the UK, indicating a return to colder weather. Is that going to last? Well, let's just play this through now until its end, so we can see. Here we go, and I'll stop it there, which is 03 GMT, Monday the 1st of February, so into the new month. And by then the sequence is showing that the blues have been pushed away eastwards, northwards. We've got a southwesterly flow or a westerly flow across most of the UK, and that has brought in this milder, or at least less cold, upper air right across the country. Perhaps in the far northeast the colder air may just be hanging on, but basically if this is correct, then by the beginning of February that milder air, which has been toing and froing with the colder air before then across the UK, will be pushing through across all of the country. So what does that mean in terms of the actual weather? To help illustrate that, I'll switch across to the mean surface level pressure and precipitation chart. And I think, again, this is quite an important one to look at closely, but the details will vary because with that boundary moving back and forth and some uncertainty about exactly where it's going to be positioned, it does make a big difference in terms of whether it's going to be raining or snowing, dry or wet, for example. So here we go. This is 12 GMT, Tuesday the 26th of January once more. What we can see, if you remember on the previous sequence, we had the cold upper level air over eastern central parts of the UK and the milder to the west. And in fact, that milder colder boundary is marked by a frontal system, with outbreaks of rain shown by the blues and the yellows and greens, which are indicating heavy bursts. If you look closely on its northeastern edge, its leading edge, because it's pushing up from the southwest, from west into across the country. So on its leading edge, the rain is falling as sleet or snow in places over northern parts of Britain. So maybe northern England, southern Scotland at this point. Now, if I play the sequence, let's see how things progress. Here we go, and I'm going to just stop it here, 06 GMT on Thursday, the 28th of January. And by then, we've got the next Atlantic frontal system moving in. This one's bringing very heavy rain to much of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. But what you can see is on its leading edge again, just like the previous one earlier in the sequence, it's turning to sleet or snow. And it does have a potential to bring some heavy falls of snow. If you can see, hopefully make out perhaps the purple shading. There's a white shading which shows snow. The purple shading shows heavy snowfall. So that is something to look out for. If I just step through this sequence chart by chart on Thursday, this is 9 GMT, 12 GMT, 15 GMT, and even by then, there's still the potential for significant falls of heavy snowfall in Scotland. And that really continues until it fizzles away later on Thursday and into Friday. But as I say, remember the details are uncertain even at this range, but there is the potential for heavy snow in northeastern Britain during this period. I'll just resume the sequence. So we're going to go into the weekend, and I'll pause it here, 15 GMT, Saturday, the 30th of January. It's quite interesting because by then what's happened is this small area of high pressure to the north of the UK has come into play, and it's dropping southwards. The colder air from the northeast is pushing southwards, as we saw on the upper air forecast sequence a little bit earlier. With the high pressure becoming a player, it should be mostly dry, but temperatures which in southern and central parts could be reaching double figures in the days before this, they are likely to take a big dip once more. So we may, for example, on Saturday, if this is correct, see maximum values even in southern counties of maybe 3, 4, 5 Celsius. So it's milder in the short term in southern and central counties, then it turns colder again through the weekend. I'll just play this through to the end so we can see how it progresses. And here we go. Big changes afoot. Monday, the 1st of January. Remember, again on the upper air sequence, we saw the milder air returning from the Atlantic. This illustrates the patterns, bringing it about quite clearly. We've got a vigorous west or southwesterly flow returning. That's really pushing right the way across the UK, bringing showers, long spells of rain. Also, you can see the isobars there, shown by the white lines. They're pretty closely packed together, and that's an indication that it will be windy. Potentially gales, you'd think, with this type of setup in the west and the northwest in exposed locations. So it's very mixed between the beginning of the forecast period and the start of February. There is the potential for snow in the northeast, and it looks like it's going to be turning milder across much of the country. And by the end of this period, that milder air will probably be reaching all parts, but there is a little uncertainty about whether it makes its way up to the northeast or not. As I say, the most likely outcome at the present time is that it will do, at least for a time. Okay, what about the first third of February? I'll jump across to the 16-day plots to take a look at how things may begin to pan out. This one is for London. I'll not spend much time talking about the short term because essentially on the top half of the plot, upper air temperatures here are rising above a 30-year average, which is really tying in quite nicely with the forecast sequences which I've just played. But as we go through the first half of February, after a mild start here around the 1st and 2nd and the 3rd of the month, we can see most of the runs here in the ensemble are predicting upper air temperatures to be above the thick black line, which shows a 30-year average. It then turns colder from about the 4th onwards. The signal for this is not particularly strong, I have to say. We can see, and I've annotated here to show the risk, the low risk of it turning very cold. By that, what I'm suggesting is that there are a few runs in the ensemble model. Remember that it contains 30 perturbations and something called the control run. So we've got 31 in the ensemble. Then we're plotting on this chart the GFS operational run as well. So we've got 32 individual plots. And out of those, there's only a few which are bringing in very cold conditions essentially from about the 5th of February to the 11th of February. It suggests, therefore, the risk of it turning very cold is low, but not one to be fully discounted at this stage. Much more likely in the southern half of the UK, this plot being for London, much more probable is that we'll see temperatures dipping below the 30-year mean, but once again, we may well end up in the rather cold category, not the very cold category. That would be the favoured option at this stage. In terms of precipitation, which is shown on the lower half, you can see there's an ongoing risk of rain between the start of the forecast period and, say, around the 5th of February. It then perhaps turns drier. It's not really very clear on this plot, but there are fewer spikes appearing between the 5th and the 11th. Again, these spikes show the output from each individual run in the ensemble. So perhaps turning drier or not as wet. So rather cold and somewhat drier during from the 5th of February onwards. I'll just show the comparable plot for Belfast in Northern Ireland, just to throw some variety into the forecast locations. The upper air temperature profile is actually very, very similar to the London one, which we've just looked at, so I won't spend time discussing it. On the precipitation part of this plot, it actually looks quite a bit wetter than the London one. Probably what you would expect, really, when there's an increase in Atlantic influence at least in the short to medium term. Remember those disturbances coming in with all their energy off the Atlantic, hitting Northern Ireland first before they make their way across the mainland. So it does show there are some really, really big rain spikes here, and those will also be in western parts. Those could also indicate very wet conditions in western parts of Britain, Wales, and Western England. So during this period, flooding could well become an issue once again. Quite interestingly, from about the 5th of February onwards, just at the very bottom of the chart here, the snow row values, they do pick up quite notably. I mean, they're very low to begin with, but then from about the 5th, we're seeing values of 7, 10, 12, and value of 12 really indicates something like 30-35% chance of sleet or snow falling down to the ground level, but as I always say with these, not necessarily accumulating. Up to Edinburgh in Scotland, and in the short term, upper air temperatures are variable, but they generally remain at lower values than they do on the London and Belfast plots. That's really in keeping with what I discussed earlier about how the milder air probably will push northeastwards across the UK, but it will be struggling at times to reach the northeast. By the 3rd of February, the signal then for it to turn colder is more marked than it is in southern parts of the UK, so more marked than it was on the London chart. And again, there are a few runs, I'd say the percentage of them is higher than on the London plot, which during this period from about 5th of February go very cold. What that suggests is, again, it's a low risk of very cold conditions developing in Scotland, northeastern Britain, but it's a higher risk than it is in the south, and it's certainly not negligible. It's definitely something to watch out for. February has a tendency, or it has done historically, to bring in cold easterly or northeasterly flows. Across the bottom here we can see the snow row values. They're actually significantly higher than they were on the London and Belfast plots, often between 10 and 20, so indicating 30, 40, 50, 60% chance of snow falling on a given day. I think it's probably worth pointing out that although this says Edinburgh on the plot, the grid point covers quite a big area. It's about ½ degree latitude by ½ degree longitude. So it's taken into, it's factoring in some of the hills in the surrounding areas. Obviously Edinburgh itself is very low lying, but the chance of snow falling in the surrounding hills is quite a lot higher. That's something worth bearing in mind when we look at the plot for Edinburgh. I think it's also worth taking a quick look at the data table showing mean surface level pressure forecasts, this one being for London. There is a sign of change as we head through February. I've highlighted the period under discussion here, Thursday the 4th of February through to Wednesday the 10th, when the ensemble runs finish. And it's different colours are used to indicate different clusters. Hopefully you can see the key along the bottom here. So pressure runs which are forecasting pressure to be below 981 millibars are in purple, 981 to 995 is light blue, 996 to 1010 is shade of green, 1011 to 1025 yellow, 1026 to 1040 this orangey brown, then above 1040 it's this pinky red. So it's showing the clusters in the ensemble being split out, and the interesting thing to note here is there's clearly a tendency for more runs to be forecasting higher pressure as we go through that period. You can see the size of the orange and yellow columns increases day by day. This is Friday the 5th, Saturday the 6th, and it's growing there. Sunday the 7th. It drops down a little bit on Monday the 8th, but then it increases again. And by the 10th, we've got 45% of all the runs in the ensemble going for pressure between 1026 and 1040 millibars, so it's pretty high. Another 29% of them between 1011 and 1025 millibars. So it's really pointing towards high pressure having a greater influence as we go through the first third of February. Probably ties in quite nicely again with the precipitation plots, which were indicating a signal for it to turn drier during this period, so which is what you would generally expect with high pressure taking more control of the weather. Just quickly looking at the comparable one for Edinburgh, it's a very similar story actually. We can see the bigger, the growing columns in yellow and orange through that period. There are a very, very small number of runs in the purple bracket still at the end, which would indicate deep areas of low pressure. So it's really, I wouldn't read too much into that at this stage. The signal here is certainly for high pressure to be more influential, but it's not 100% sure, as you wouldn't expect it to be, of course, at that range. It's a long way off. Quickly show you the 500 HPA height anomaly charts, because there is a strong correlation between these and surface pressure, which we've just been looking at. This one is for days 0 to 5, starting on Tuesday the 26th of January. The blue shading is indicating lower relative to the 30-year average 500 HPA heights, with orange and brown shading indicating higher than average 500 HPA anomaly heights. It's important to remember these are not showing areas of high and low pressure. They are anomalies. So even though over Iceland, for example, here we can see a orange shading indicating a positive anomaly, it's worth bearing in mind that there is generally areas of low pressure over the Iceland area. This may simply be indicating that those areas of low pressure are weaker than they usually are at this time. But the reason I wanted to show you this was to look at how it changes between days 0 to 5. So here we go. Initially, we've got a big negative anomaly over the UK, which is really associated with those areas of low pressure that we're seeing pushing across the country. If we go to days 10 to 15, by then there is something of a change. In actual fact, the negative anomaly is really becoming focused to the south of the UK, with a strong positive anomaly over Iceland and Greenland there in the top left of the chart. So that may well be supporting an increased chance of high pressure to the north of the UK, or at least for, as I mentioned, at least for the area of low pressure to our northwest to be significantly weaker than it is on average through this time of the year. And also with the lower heights to the south of the UK, that may well be indicating that what we sometimes see, high pressure over Iberia, the Azores, there may be a signal from this for that to be weaker than it usually is. Now, taking those two things into account would suggest an increased possibility of cold weather in the UK. If it does turn colder during the first third of February, is it likely to last? Well, just very, very quickly, here's the London GEFS 35-day plot showing upper air temperatures, and what it indicates is they are most likely to be close to or slightly below the 30-year average for much of the middle third of the month, and even towards the end of February, they are fluctuating around that average. So we could be seeing an increased risk of colder spells throughout the month, although the signal there again it's quite weak, and at this range we are at a very, very, very low level of forecast confidence, of course. Right, to summarise, it's an unsettled start with bands of rain pushing eastwards. As they bump into the colder air over northeast of Britain, rain increasingly turns to sleet or snow, and there could be some heavy falls over high ground in northeastern Britain at times. In the southern half of the UK, it's likely to turn milder, but around the 29th or the 30th of January, the cold air in the northeast may well return southwards, at least for a short period of time. In turn, that leads to an increased risk of transitional snow when the next Atlantic disturbance moves in. Week 2 is likely to begin quite unsettled and relatively mild, although there is a chance of the colder air at this point still being in situ over northern parts of the United Kingdom, and if that is the case, then the risk of snow up there will be higher. Towards the end of the period, the signal is for high pressure to become more influential and also for it to turn colder. So there we have it. Now, if you enjoyed this video and found it useful, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Thanks very much now. Bye.